helping with the integration of the Common App into our design awards. And I am a designer and sustainability advisor at Perkins Will here in Austin. We have Josh Ledger. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Josh Ledger. I'm the president, co-chair, chair-elect of the Committee on the Environment, and I'm a project manager, project architect at Forgecraft Architecture, and happy to talk about the Common App today.
And then we have Bonnie Gray.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bonnie Gray with GSC Architects. I am an associate principal. I have done sustainability design for many years, been part of COTE forever. COTE, I'm happy to help with the Design Common App also.
Thank you all. And so today we'll be presenting and doing a run through of the Common App. We had a session, a first session, our Common App clinic. We went through and went over the framework for design excellence, which the Common App is based on. If you missed that session, it was recorded and posted online. Rob can probably put a link in the chat for you. We encourage you all to go back and watch that. It has a lot of great intro information to get you started. And then today we'll be covering in more detail the Common App. So just a brief overview. Yeah.
Just if anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll be watching that, so and be able to answer that at the end or during the presentation as well.
Thanks, Josh.
Right.
So just a brief overview, the Common App is a program and it tries to install or instill the AIA principles of design excellence defined by the framework for design excellence, which we reviewed at the last clinic. As I mentioned, state and city chapters across the country are beginning to integrate this into their design awards, including TXA, and in an effort to align with the framework. They, as part of AIA's mission over the past several years in making this more of at the forefront of what we do, we're recognizing projects that perform, they have to function, they have to stand up for and represent our values as architects for protecting the planet, protecting communities, protecting the health of occupants and local ecosystems, basically the 10 measures represented with the framework. So the Common App is divided into two sections. The first section is for basic project information, and the second section includes the 10 measures and associated questions and prompts. The design for there's design for integration, design for communities, ecosystems, water, economy, energy, well-being, resources, change, and discovery. We will walk you through each of those different sections. And so as you fill out each of the fields, you'll notice that at the top, there's this spider graph. So this is what really makes the Common App unique and very usable for our judging process. It represents how a project is performing based on the 10 measures. As it's filled out, it starts to populate the spider graph in each of the different areas. The idea behind this is to rank projects isn't to rank projects by EUI, for instance. It's not to say you got 7.5 points on resources and this other project got 7.4, therefore the first project wins. This is just one of the many aspects that will be used to inform the jury's decision. And it helps ensure the jury selects winning projects with a holistic perspective to make sure the best all-around projects win. The jury wants to see how your project is part of the solution to a healthier, more sustainable, thriving, equitable environment. To ensure the building is useful and functional over the next several decades, beyond how it looks, how it conserves or produces energy, how it can adapt over time, If your design team hasn't been thinking about these things, it's time to do that. And we encourage you all to use the frameworks to help you do that. And it's time to do that for future projects as well. This Common App combines narratives to describe your intentions, along with your narrative that's required for the design awards, which is a general overview, in addition to photographs as well. But the Common App more so offers the judges a view into some of the metrics that make up the excellence of your project. So this tool is useful for everyone. It's useful for the jury because they get to understand at a deeper level what your project does versus how it looks, and it should be useful for you or those filling it out to help you become more familiar with the measures and to help improve the way you design going forward. So going into the specifics, starting with the project information section, self-explanatory, you're going to be entering your project name and client at the top. If you want the client to remain confidential, you can click this little box here. Location and size, so address, city, state, zip code, country, pretty self-explanatory. You will want to define your climate zone, which you can find with the ASHRAE climate zones tool on the right. If your project is in Austin, most likely it's within climate zone 2A, hot and humid. This will help with identifying information throughout the rest of the Common App. Then you'll want to define the building use. So you can identify up to 3 main building uses, and you'll want to make sure that those, how they break down, adds up to 100%. If it's just one use, you'll just fill out the first box, put 100%. For this, we're showing an example: residential multifamily 50%, food restaurant 10%, retail general 40%. You want to be sure that you enter this information because this then sets your EUI benchmark, which is based on the 2030 commitment. And then project scope. So this includes whether the project is new construction or renovation or interiors. If your project does not fall within either any of those 3 categories, please let us know. We can guide you on what to do as an alternative. I know there were several installation projects submitted last year, and so we can work through that, how we do that with you. You'll want to enter number of stories, site area, and floor area. This will auto-calculate your FAR. Cost data, you'll want to enter your permit year. This will then determine what the what your 2030 challenge goal is. So if the permit year was before 2020, it will be set to 70% here. If it's after, it'll be set to 80%. And if you don't know what 2030, ARE 2030 is, there's a link in the Common App, or I'm sure Josh would be more than happy to put some links in the chat for you, as he's been hosting our 2030 sessions through AIA. And then you'll want to enter your total construction building cost and your cost per square foot. This information is important because it will allow for an auto calculation within the design for resources section of the Common App. Use data, you want to enter your annual hours of operation during normal use. For example, if it's in use 24/7, you'll enter 168. Weekdays 9 to 5, 40, 9 to 5. And then if it's used on the weekends, an additional 16 hours. Your typical occupancy, this is basically based on normal use, hours of use, and then total person hours is auto-calculated from those 2 numbers. Basically, everything that is gray is information that you enter, and then everything in white is a locked cell that is automatically calculated. Within then the last section within the intro is the 2030 commitment or rating system. So in here, you're going to want to let us know if your firm is a signatory of the AIA 2030 commitment. AIA is strongly encouraging every firm to make this commitment. So we highly encourage you all to do that if you're not already. If the project is recorded within the AIA 2030 DDX or Design Data Exchange, you'll enter yes or no here. And then if the project is certified with another third-party rating system, such as LEED, LBC, AEGB, etc., you can say yes or no here, and then indicate in the text box below which program or which certification rating system the project is certified with and the year achieved. If you are targeting a certification, it's not quite certified, please just leave these sections blank. And now I will pass it off to Bonnie. She's going to run you through the first 3 measures, starting with design for integration.
Thanks, Kendall. Okay, if you're not overwhelmed yet, we're going to try to make this easier for you. I do think if you look through these just in your leisure time, it makes a lot more sense. Measure 1, design for integration. I know every one of you on this call has done this because we're all architects. That's how we design. We start from the beginning and we go from there. We ask our clients everything about their possible project. You know, what is good? What is bad? What don't you want? What do you want? Good design elevates every project. We know this. And the thoughtful process that goes into it is what makes design for integration. You'll see, and Kendall has pointed this out, the AIA toolkit for detailed strategies. If you can click on that, Kendall. If you're saying, well, what is this? This will tell you what it is. If you scroll down, it's going to give you the items for the framework of how to fill this in, or it'll give you, if you could only do one thing, it gives you a list there of what you could do. The biggest thing that we want to do with integration is to bring in measures 1 through 9, somehow talk about them, that you thought about them in the design of your project. Looking at the AIA California review of the Common App, the biggest item that they talked about was the statement of design excellence. You know, how does your project improve the area? How does your project conserve energy or provide comfort? And comfort may be that it looks good, that it makes people feel good to walk their dog by it. That's part of what this is, integration. I do a lot of LEED projects. There is a LEED point of the integrative process. It's everything. It's the same thing as what we're seeing right here. I can say that the design for integration, where it talks about delivering beauty and function in balance, one of the projects that I actually snagged a tour of for my LEED V4 or Green Associate class was the Q2 Stadium in Austin. One of the points that they did get was beauty and design. And I asked Maria Flores about that for Gensler. How did you get this? What did you document? And when they walked us through the stadium, you could see how they got beauty and design. You know, the vistas, the views, just everything about it was part of the integration process. So think about your project. How do you start design? How do you integrate everything in the design items 1 through 9? And you'll be able to fill in the project summary, the impact statement, and the statement of design excellence. The next one, design for equitable communities. Even if your project has locked doors and it's nobody can get in without a badge. Your design still affects more than the people that are the occupants of the building. If you drive by it on MOPAC, if you drive by it on I-35, you're forming an opinion. Is this good? Is it pleasant? Is it awful? We know this. The statement of design says design solutions are more than the client and current occupants. If you go to the AIA toolkit, click it, be sure to do that, and look at what they say to do and what are the very minimum items you can do, you'll understand this. And part of it is, do I want to ride my bike by your project? Do I want to walk through or by your project? That's part of it. If I never walk in your building, or if it's not a building, something else, that's what equitable communities are. That's what that is. So when you look at equitable communities, you're going to talk, you will be talking about several things. Let's see, I think some of these have yes or no. Yes, justice and equity is a yes or no question. Even if you think they're not associated directly with your project, think again, because I bet you're connecting to the whole neighborhood, the whole community, and it's somehow affecting them somehow. So look at that. In the transportation choice equity walk score, be sure and click your walk score over to the right. It's a link where you can actually get, if you put in your neighborhood, put in the address, you'll get a walk score. Higher scores are going to be in downtown Austin, for instance. Lower scores will be rural designs. That's okay. It shows what the project is. And you also have alternative strategies for remote rural projects. You know, okay, maybe you don't have a walkable project. How do you make it work? How do you make it work for the neighborhood if there is a neighborhood? So that's what design for equitable communities is. Let's go to ecosystems. Your project isn't just about people, it's about living beings that lived in the area or in the sky, birds, animals, fish, you name it. How did you make this an eco-friendly project? Kendall's already gone to the IDA, which is the, I forgot what it is. Oh, it's the night sky. If you have a project within the city of Austin, you're going to be needing the dark sky ordinance, no matter what. Have shields on your exterior lighting, such, so that you don't splay lighting everywhere in the neighborhood. You've seen that before. Also, the bird-friendly design link is there about what kind of glazing do you have? How do you make a bird-safe building? There's ways to do it, for sure. On a project I just did, a lot of it was about animals and species and habitat within the area, on the ground or so. So we had to think about that also. Excuse me. There's a lot of yes and no questions there. Excuse me, but also talk about your design for narrative. Excuse me. I think that's it.
Here, take a drink of water, Bonnie.
Let me get it.
I'll just finish this up. In the narrative section, you do want to make sure that you identify the site environment, whether it's urban, suburban, or rural. And then in the narrative, you can add to any of the questions above, or you can answer how you supported regional habitat restoration, how the design helped users become more aware or connected with the project's place, like are there educational elements in place on the site, etc. And so now we'll pass it off to Josh to go through the next 4.
All right. Thanks, Bonnie and Kendall, for that kind of introduction for the first 3 measures. So we'll be talking about the next 4. So measure 4 is design for water. All of these are pretty self-explanatory. So Kendall, if you want to just kind of go through, click on, see kind of what the drop downs are. They're all kind of these yes or no questions. And when it comes to these kind of yes or no questions, have you thought about it? Is it a majority? So with does the project design meet EPA water sense goals? If the majority of your fixtures are meeting that, then, and if you've thought about it, then answer yes. If you don't know what water sense is, or you haven't thought about that, then the answer would be no. And this all will help with that kind of getting the spider graph at the top filled out. So see, as Kendall's been filling that out, those kind of lines have been moving around. So if potable water use is used for irrigation, so this design for water measure is about kind of decreasing potable water usage. Potable water use for cooling, so if you have a cooling tower, or if you've kind of developed an HVAC strategy that conserves your potable water. So some of these might be things that you have to talk to your mechanical engineer about to get an answer on. But they should be things that if y'all get a design award because you've thought about these things, which if you have thought about these things, they should be invested in this, that they'll be happy to share that award with y'all. And then the design for water narrative just provides more context for the jury to know kind of what has been thought through when thinking about conserving water on your project. And just kind of as a note, the narratives don't affect that spider graph. They're just to provide more information on the different measures and how your team has thought about those. So moving down to measure 5, design for economy. So this kind of economy has to do with both kind of making the building the right size, kind of making sure that you're not overbuilding, as well as thinking about kind of cost per square foot and what the resource use for your design has been, and how that kind of starts to get into embodied energy, embodied carbon, and all that. So this building efficiency / right sizing, that square foot per occupant is based on inputs that was put in up here at the top. So that gets kind of your floor area and then your typical occupancy. So that's just kind of based on your occupancy type. So if that's not kind of directly correlated to how you think the space will be used, like that's okay. Like it doesn't have to match up completely, since that is kind of just being auto-generated. And then there's a short narrative for describing if and what efforts have been used to right size the building. And then yes or no with this affordability question that you can elaborate on down at the design for economy narrative. And then there's the yes or no question for if the spaces have been designed for multiple purposes. And I'd say, like, if you thought about that during the design, say yes. If you haven't thought about that, or there's like no real design kind of thinking behind it, then answer no. And then the cost per square foot is auto-generated from the kind of initial information as well. And then the narrative just allows you to kind of place context for all these and provide a description for kind of what was thought of through the design process. Measure 6, design for energy. So kind of some of these are going to be auto-generated, and they kind of correlate with the AI 2030 benchmarks. So baseline and code. So this energy code that the project was built to, Kendall, if you want to click on that. So there's a drop down of kind of all the different energy codes. So there's the Washington State Code, California Title 24, Seattle Energy Code, and then the ones that, if your project's in Austin, are probably going to be more useful are the IECC or the ASHRAE codes. And since this is for the 2021 Design Awards, it's probably not an option for the 2021 IECC that the city just passed. So that will come in an update. Kendall, do you want to go ahead and select the IECC 2006 just to show how these estimated benchmarks kind of change? So the benchmark EUI is based off of a building survey done by the Department of Energy. So that number is going to stay consistent. The estimated EUI based on code will change depending on what code is selected. So the 2006 IECC is about a 10% reduction from that baseline, whereas the 2018 is about a 45% reduction, 45% reduction. So if you don't have an energy model or you haven't done energy modeling for the project, the numbers below that in energy performance will be auto-generated from that selection. So you'll still get some benefit from kind of filling this out and having that show up on the spider graph just by selecting the correct energy code. If for whatever reason you think that your project was designed in a way that would be better than the percent reduction of that energy code, but you haven't done an energy model, there is a link there on the right to EUI from Title 24 that's kind of based on California Title 24, getting the EUI from that. So here on the right side of the page, there's these calculation instructions. It does take a little bit of time, kind of based on square footages and assemblies. So if your project is more just kind of based on prescriptive energy code, it's probably not worth the time investment to kind of go through making that conversion. But if there's definitely been design thinking saying that, okay, yeah, we're going to make the most energy efficient building without doing an energy model, it might be worth it to get a couple kind of more points by going through that conversion. And then, so back to energy performance. Kendall, can you click the none energy code? So there's two kind of ways that you can input your energy performance. So none will be energy code and relate back to what you put on for baseline and code, or there's modeled energy if you have an energy model, or measured energy if you have your utility bills. So if it's utility bills, you can kind of take that number, divide it by square foot, and that will give you your building performance. And so you can fill that in with EUI gross and EUI offset by on-site renewables. Or if you have modeled, you can kind of put in your energy model information as well. And if this has been done in-house, feel free to kind of put that in. If you have an energy model for compliance or for design, you can use either of those numbers. I guess trying to get the one that you think will be more accurate and more kind of right on is the preference if for some reason you have both of those. And then the white there will be auto-generated. So you get a little sad face, I believe, if your project doesn't meet the 2030 challenge. But if it does, then you get, yeah, there you go. So it will tell you kind of what the benchmark, where you're at, and how much of the project has been reduced by renewables. And then getting down to the energy conservation process. So this is where it starts to ask if you've done a design model, a performance, a compliance model. So you can kind of put in that information. And this kind of information is really kind of putting an emphasis on using design energy models to make informed decisions and create more efficient buildings. So those are kind of little drop downs that you can select from. And then there's the design for energy narrative, where you can start to put in kind of what has been done that might be beyond code or that's been thought of to reduce the energy usage of your project. It's going down to measures for well-being. Again, so does every regularly occupied space have operable windows? Again, majority of spaces, answer yes. If majority of spaces do not, then answer no. And then thinking through kind of the rest are these yes or no questions as well, which you might have kind of readily available, or you might have to ask an engineer if those have been thought of or used throughout the design. And then if you have used a chemicals of concern list to make your material selection, so that could be the Living Building Challenge red list, the Perkins and Will materials of concern, kind of any of those chemicals of concerns lists to help make decisions, go ahead and answer yes on there. And then again, a narrative, so thinking through like, oh, is plaster used instead of paint, kind of those type of decisions, or daylighting spaces that really highlight kind of what design decisions have been made to make the spaces healthier and more enjoyable for the occupants and to make them happier and healthier.
Thanks, Josh. And I will wrap up with the last three measures. So measure 8 is design for resources. This section looks at a few different things, mostly embodied carbon being the major one as a primary focus. The first question, did the project conduct a life cycle analysis, or LCA? That's a yes or no question. And you can go to the toolkit resources to figure out what lifecycle analysis tools are accepted. You'll want to make sure that you define your primary structural system, whether it's steel, heavy timber, wood frame, a mix, or other. And then provide embodied carbon results. If you did do an LCA, just make sure that you enter the units. The units are typically reported in kilograms CO2e per square meter. And then it asks if you used or prioritized using local and or recycled content. If that was a major criterion for material selection, you'll answer yes if an analysis of available local or recycled materials did influence your design decisions. If it wasn't part of the process, then you would answer no. It asks, was wood used on the project? If so, obviously specifying FSC certified wood is ideal. So you would answer yes if 95% or more of the wood that you use on the project is FSC certified. And you'll want to make sure that you check with your GC to make sure that that was the case, that there was follow through. Were there deliberate steps taken to substantially reduce material or embodied carbon in the structural design? This could include thinking about right sizing the structural systems, um, using admixtures for concrete to reduce the amount of cement, and things of that sort. So you can answer yes or no there. And then were the concrete mixtures optimized for embodied carbon reduction? So did you decrease the amount of cement by including supplementary cementitious materials? And this might be something that you have to ask your structural engineer about. Sometimes it is just base practice for them to include a certain amount of SCMs, or they may be using different type of cement anyways. And then did the project incorporate existing structure or infrastructure? Obviously, we want to see more projects reusing what's existing. So if you did use any portion, reuse any portion, please answer yes here. And then as per the other sections, there's our narrative section to help you expand on the items above. So if you used any kind of innovative sourcing techniques for your materials, you'll enter that information here. If you thought about dematerialization and innovative ways of not using materials, so to decrease carbon footprint, you can enter that information. You can answer how the project promotes zero waste through its life cycle, or how long the project it was designed to last, and how that affects the materials put in place. And then there are a couple links on the side, like the other sections, that explain some general best practices for reducing embodied carbon on your projects. I would suggest looking at the 2030 materials palette, as well as the toolkit for general explanation as well. So then moving on to design for change. This is mostly looking at resiliency, but also looking at long life loose fit, so the ability of a project to adapt and add value over time. The first question is, what is the design lifespan of the building? So there are some general guidelines given here on the right based on construction type and use and structure. So if it's a stick frame, for instance, the lifespan or the average lifespan is typically around 30 years versus solid masonry is typically around 1,000 years. This is kind of a best case scenario. And then if your project is an interiors project, that number will likely be based on the leasing period. And just make sure that you do enter just a number, otherwise it will not calculate correctly. Then was the building designed for disassembly? You'll answer yes if the structural members are bolted versus nailed or welded. If materials are applied using some sort of clip system versus adhesives. Basically, just making sure that when the lifespan of the project is over, or if there needs to be any renovations, those materials can then be switched out and recycled easily versus going to the landfill. Was future flexibility designed into the program? So you'll answer yes here if the building can be easily used for a different purpose in the future. For instance, if you're designing a big box store, have you taken into consideration how that might then change uses in the future when that box store is not relevant anymore? Can the building remain useful for a short term without power? You'll answer yes here if the envelope, for example, is better than current code and glazing is less than 40%. If you're designing a fully glass building, it's likely going to be more difficult to keep it cool and heated without power in place. The next question is, can the building remain useful for a short term without utility power? So you'll answer yes if this is designed to be all electric versus natural gas. Austin does have a plan in place to phase out the use of natural gas over time and be all electric. So is the building designed for that change in the future? Is the building designed to accept future clean grid power, meaning more renewable energy? So you'll answer yes here if it contains backup power generation and or storage. So for in the instance of another storm Uri, the building is able to function for a certain amount of time without being on the grid. And has the design made accommodations for projected climate change over the building's lifespan? Ideally, every project is doing some sort of climate analysis or resiliency analysis. You can go to the AIA guide and or AIA website under resiliency to look at examples of how you can do that. There are several great resources out there. So you'll answer yes or no here. And then identifying local risks that the project has been designed to mitigate. So we know here in Austin that we're going to be seeing more frequent flooding, extreme temperature changes, fluctuations, potential wildfires, and believe it or not, tornadic activity in the future. So has your design taken into these things into consideration? Yes or no? And then in the narrative box, this will be where you explain what the shocks and stressors you identified are, and how your building addresses those future risks and vulnerabilities, not just from a climate perspective, but also social and economic. And then you can also explain how your project addresses passive survivability and or livability, and if the project was designed for adapting to anticipated future uses or changing markets. And last but not least, design for discovery. This is basically looking at analyzing our projects post-occupancy, during occupancy, looking at lessons learned from previous projects, because we know that, as an industry, as professionals, we grow by understanding our strengths and weaknesses with our current work, with our past work. So it's asking, was a post-occupancy evaluation conducted for the project, yes or no? If this was an important strategy for your project. It asks, was an occupant satisfaction survey conducted, yes or no? This is looking at understanding and providing for occupant needs. Were improvements made during occupancy based on these findings? Yes or no? The discovery should lead to improvement. So what did you learn from the above and how did you address those things? You can explain more in the narrative section on that. What lessons did you learn? What would you do differently for the next hypothetical same project for future projects? How did the project's design process foster a long-term relationship with designers and the team and the clients? How are the occupants using it? Is it efficient? And if not, how the project's performance data and experiential stories shared so that your firm, other designers, other firms can learn from those lessons. And then really just explaining what design strategies promoted a sense of discovery and delight within the narrative section. So each of these narrative sections are really meant to be brief, a couple sentences, explanation, adding to the data entered above each of these narrative boxes. As Josh mentioned, these do not contribute directly to your spider graph at the top, but it is great information to give the jury a more overall view of what you were doing, what you were striving for with the design. So that is the overall run through of the Common App. You can see once you've entered that data, this graph at the top starts to fill out. And as the jury is looking through your award applications and the Common App, this will just give them a really general overview of where your strengths and weaknesses were. Again, it is not a point-based system, so it is really just highlighting what your project's strengths were versus anything else. We don't expect that you'll be excelling in every category, as every project has different priorities based on client and location needs and requirements. So now we'll open it up to questions. So I guess first of all, Bonnie and Josh, have there been any questions?
There are a
Okay.
few. I think Josh answered a couple, but
Yeah.
let me see here. This
Yeah,
question, it does look like
there's
the
something about
common.
versioning.
I'm
Oh.
sorry.
Oh, versions of the app. So like
Yes.
when it's going to
yes.
be updated and how often that will be.
Yes. So
Right.
we're in the process right now of working on the next version. We will not be seeing that version for this year's design awards. That will be for next year's. But if there are any elements of the Common App that aren't specifically seeming to work for your project type, please let us know and we can see if we can accommodate your needs. Uh, and we can also suggest those changes for the next version. But it will be on an annual basis.
Right. And Bud asked that question, Bud Frank. You're right. It is different now from what was used with TXA last year. But I can tell from what we're looking at right now, it's simpler. It's more condensed. It combines a few things. There used to be predicted energy up in the spider graph and used energy. Never could figure that one out, but now we're just at energy. So I think it's better. And every time we do this, it's going to be a little bit better from all of your comments and just what we see. Let's see what else we asked. I know.
Resources for converting kilowatt hours to kBTU.
I answered that.
Yeah,
Oh,
he gave
great.
Josh gave a link. Will Wood did ask about renovations for design for resources. You know what? A renovation project would work so well in this. I just know it would. I haven't filled it out for a renovation project, but you could do so many good things with this. And you're right. Maybe you keep the structure, maybe you keep, I don't know, the furniture and reuse it. You fill it in and design for resources.
To expand on that question, William, I think that, you know, there are opportunities to do life cycle analysis, especially for existing buildings. You can see a significant reduction in embodied carbon if you're reusing more than you're adding. So that would be really great data for your company to use to improve your design. If you're not able to use an LCA tool, you didn't for this scenario, I would just recommend really highlighting strategies for the benefits of reusing existing versus starting anew. I think that you can certainly still answer and design to each of the other questions as well, especially sourcing any kind of local or recycled content materials. Certainly specifying FSC wood is still on the table, and then reducing material use in general. So if you're doing a renovation, is there the opportunity to take up the flooring and just use the slab as is, and
Good, how are you?
instead of adding new, etc.
Yeah, what's up?
Here's another question, Kendall. When reviewing the spider graph, is it best to use narratives to enhance areas that you excelled in or to make up for shortcomings? Now, narratives don't count in the spider graph. Is that correct, Kendall?
That's right.
So how would you, I don't know that you can you make up for shortcomings? I don't know that you can. Your data is what it is.
So how I would think about the narratives is if you have an excelling part of your project and the jury wants to know why it's so excelling, the narrative will back that up. If you have something that is not excelling, the narrative can kind of explain why that is the case.
Yeah.
So
it just provides a little bit more background information for the jury to consider when looking at these.
Yep. Yeah, I think both and.
Okay, and
just that was my question, and just to expand on that, are all narratives, I assume all narratives are being read. I guess part of it, are they looking at your parts that you excelled in and making that what your project is about, so then the other narratives are being discounted because they're not as important?
I think it's important for them to understand maybe why you didn't excel in a certain area. Not from the standpoint of any kind of excuses, just explaining to them that maybe it wasn't part of the scope. There were site limitations, the budget limitations. I think all of that is important for the jury to take into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's all of our questions.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience then? If you would like to go and unmute yourself.
If you can, take this and plug it in as just an example to see what it does. Plug in a project that you're not planning to submit and just see what the spider graph does. See what you need to do in order to make sure all the information is shown and captured.
And please just, of course, just make sure that you're honest and truthful with your answers. Doesn't do anyone a service if you're not, including
Right.
yourself. So, and I think that at first glance, this does seem ominous. Once you get into the details of it, it is quite self-explanatory, and there are the resources there to help you fill certain things out. I would reach out to your consultants if you have any questions on any of the categories. They can help you. They'll probably help answer some of the questions. You've probably thought, Bunny said this, you've probably thought about a lot of these things already. So this is an opportunity to not only just learn and reflect on your project strengths, but to learn and utilize these measures moving forward. If there are no other questions, we will leave it here. This is being recorded and will be posted on AIA's website with the Clinic One recording. All the resources should be up on the Design Awards site, so you can download everything that you need there. And if you have any questions, please forward them to the Design Awards Committee, Ingrid, the AIA. All of those questions will be filtered to the right audience to answer the best that we can. And good luck to everyone.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.